is Elizabeth Warren, and I'm the woman who's going to beat Donald Trump. I am also going to help take back the Senate and put Mitch McConnell out of a job. Here we are, Michigan. You've got exactly 1 week until you start voting. As you know, right now, voting is going on in California and Massachusetts, pretty much still all over this country. I know results will still keep coming in through the night. But what I see happening is a lot of folks trying to turn voting into some complicated strategy. You know, pundits, friends, neighbors are all saying you have to second guess yourself on this. They're playing games about prediction and strategy. You know, guess what your neighbors are up to here. But prediction has been a terrible business, and the pundits have gotten it wrong over and over. So here's my advice. I've got some advice that I want to start with tonight. So here's my advice. Cast a vote that will make you proud. Cast a vote from your heart. And vote for the person you think will make the best president of the United States of America. Because I want you to think for a minute about this democracy. You are the ones who get to pick the person who will be the next president, and it is an awesome thing. You are going to do it right here in Michigan next week. People are doing it in California right now, and that's what it means to have a democracy. I'm in this race because I believe I will make the best president of the United States of America. Tell you why. I was not born a politician, but I was born a fighter. And I want you to know this. Is this on? Good. I want you to know this. I gotta have a loud voice here. I come by this honest. I think that maybe the reason I fought all my life is because I learned this from my mother. I want to tell you a story about me. I grew up in Oklahoma. Okay, we got a few Okies here. I grew up in Oklahoma. I am the baby. I have 3 much older brothers. They all went off and joined the military. I am what used to be called a late in life baby. My mother always just called me the surprise. Yep, my 3 brothers are all retired. They're back in Oklahoma now. To this day, they are referred to as the boys. That's to distinguish them from the surprise. Now, when I was in middle school, all 3 of the boys were gone by then, and it was just my mom and my daddy and me. And my daddy had a heart attack. He pulled through, but he couldn't work for a long, long time. And I still remember the day when we lost the family station wagon. I remember how my mother used to tuck me in at night, and she would always kiss me and give me this big smile, and I knew what was coming next. She'd leave my room, close the door, and then I'd hear her start to cry. She never wanted to cry in front of me, and I knew that. This is when I learned words like mortgage and foreclosure. And one day, I walked into my folks' bedroom, and laid out on the bed was the dress. Now, some of you in this room will know the dress. It's the one that only comes out for weddings, funerals, and graduations. And there, down by the foot of the bed, was my mother. And she had on her slip, and she was in her stocking feet, and she was pacing back and forth. And she was saying, "We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house. We will not lose this house." She was 50 years old. She had never worked outside the home, and she was terrified. So she looks up and she sees me standing in the doorway. I'm just a kid. And she looks at me, and she looks at that dress, and she looks back at me, and she walks over and she pulls that dress on. She puts on her high heels, and she walks to the Sears, where she gets a full-time minimum wage job answering phones. And that minimum wage job saved our house, and it also saved our family. And that is the first lesson my mother taught me. And that is, no matter how scared you are, no matter how hard it looks, you get out there and you fight for the people you love. It's what I believe. It's what I believe. And here's the thing about that story. I've always carried that in my heart. You want to know who I am? There it is. But I'll tell you another thing about that story. That story is a story about my mother. It's a story about millions of people all across this country who do this every single day. But it is also a story about government. Because understand this. When I was a kid, a full-time minimum wage job in America would support a family of 3. It would cover a mortgage, it would pay the utilities, and it would put food on the table. Today, a full-time minimum wage job in America will not keep a mama and a baby out of poverty. That is wrong, and that is why I am in this fight. And I'll tell you something else about that. That change did not happen by accident. That change was not the result of gravity. That change happened because of who government works for. When I was a kid, the question asked in Washington for setting the minimum wage is, what does it take a family of 3 to make it in America's middle class? What does it take a family to have something solid they can build on? What does it take a family to be able to just get a toehold in this economy and build something going forward? Today, the question asked in Washington for setting the minimum wage is, what will maximize the profits of giant multinational corporations? Well, I don't want a government that works for giant multinational corporations. I want one that works for our families. I got a plan for that. In fact, I got a lot of plans for that. So I want to tell you just a little story. I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff. I just want to tell you a little story about what it means to get in a fight. So in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, I was watching what was happening. I was studying families that go broke. And what I was starting to see over and over were people who were getting cheated on mortgages, that they had their own homes already. And someone would come and sell them a mortgage to refinance their home, and by golly, refinance them right out of it. And the banks were making more and more money, and more families were getting hurt. They started out by targeting communities of color. African-American homeowners, Latinx homeowners. They went after seniors. And I started ringing alarm bells everywhere I could. We got a real problem over here. And here's what I discovered. Nobody wanted to hear it. When your ears are stuffed with money, it's hard to hear. So the banks kept on selling those mortgages, and the regulators just looked the other way. The regulators were so deep in the pocket of the banks, they couldn't even hear what was going on. And sure enough, economy crashed in 2008. We just loaded up on that much debt, brought it down. But I hope you all feel better. The banks got bailed out. Millions of families got left behind. Families right here in Detroit got left behind. Millions of people lost their jobs. Millions of people saw their pension funds shrink. Over and over, this pain was felt by families all across this country. So I decided at this point, wait a minute, we're going to make it through this crisis. There's going to be financial reform. By golly, this financial reform is going to have some protection to make sure that we never wreck this economy again with a bunch of banks cheating people. So I had this idea for an agency, right? Man, that sounds sexy. So I had this idea for this agency, and the basic idea is the same as the idea behind the safety. We have Consumer Product Safety Commission. You can't sell a toaster in America that has a 1 in 5 chance of burning down your house. You shouldn't be able to sell a mortgage that has a 1 in 5 chance, which these did, of costing a family their home. So that's the basic idea. And I wanted an agency. I don't want a single law. I wanted an agency because I knew the banks will rework these things. They'll give it another name. They'll figure out how to rewire it. So I wanted an agency that would have one job, just to be on the side of families, to make sure they don't get cheated on, let's make it all of it, mortgages, credit cards, payday loans, student loans. You don't get cheated on financial products. So that's the basic idea. So I go to Washington. Now, remember, I'm not in elected office. That's not my job. I'm a full-time teacher and researcher. Let's hear it for the nerds. Yes. So I go to Washington, and basically I knock on doors. Anybody who'll talk to me, Democrat, Republican, I don't care. I'm just trying to pitch the idea for this agency. We're in a crisis. We're going to rewrite the laws. Let's get this agency in it. And here's what happened. Basically, I started getting the same 2 answers from everybody. It just really knocked me over. And the first answer was, that's actually a pretty good idea. You could make a real difference. That's structural change. That would actually make a difference in the market. And the second half to the answer was, don't even try. You'll be up against the banks. You'll be up against Wall Street. You'll be up against all of the Republicans, and shoot, you'll be up against half the Democrats on this. You will never get it done. Now, I get it. So I heard this and I thought, I get it. Big structural change is hard, but it is the right thing to do. So we got in this fight and took on the big banks. They were spending more than $1 million a day for nearly a year, just trying to fight back against this and the other financial reforms. But boy, this was the heart of it. They were out there. We fought the Republicans. We fought them all. But we built the coalitions. And in 2010, Barack Obama signed that agency into law.